honestly, for me. I don't remember why. Who has a paper they don't like?
So we're putting
I have paper that I can give you.
Like one of them is like, you know, late life college student, self-made millionaire, like super smart dude. So I'm trying to like help him out.
Yeah.
And I'm like giving him
Whoa.
I don't know that.
Oh, it's love. Oh, it's
Okay.
That's the second line.
How about this one? Yeah, okay. I can write that down. What the fuck is going on? And I can't, normally if it was anybody else, I'd be like, shut the fuck up and write what I'm saying. Like, and I'm like, okay. Oh, fuck, alright, what do you want me to say? Shit. Why am I even here?
That's...
Fuck it, I'm done with it.
What is this?
Well, I'm glad that you survived a good choking.
It would have been another novice. Yeah.
Alright,
Write
are
it.
we-
Write it.
Are we ready to go?
Yes.
Alright,
I guess. Probably not, though.
Hey, which one are you going to flow for me?
No, I like the two others. I'm not tall enough for that.
Grow.
Excuse me, maybe if you could not be. Oh my god, I forgot my camera.
You want to use one first? Or do you want to go get it?
It's
If you want to go run and get it, that's fine. We're fine with that. They're fine with that.
I bet we can crack 10 drugs while you're gone.
Well, I will not prep while she's gone, just to be nice.
I guess you want that.
Fuck, I'm gonna prep the shit out of you. I'm gonna get all your arguments out of
DMC. LOC. The big lines down.
DMG?
If I run out of paper, I'm not going to write the argument down.
Wait,
Would you like that paper?
I'm
I would appreciate it if you would.
gonna go really old school Steve Hunt style. Just fold the paper in half.
Right.
Right. Go off.
Check. Good argument. Sad face. Bad argument.
Thumbs down.
I voted F because they have 2 more checks in their box.
Although, frequently, he was right. His checks ended up, yeah,
There's gonna be a
There's
good
slow skills, like.
I'm like, sir, I have no idea you were
How
right.
did How you did this?
He did get sat on a
Yeah.
11-1
It's
10.
irony. We're doing
Oh,
it.
Yeah, like,
was it like Cena or any team that?
It was seated at. He votes on a T that gets kicked.
Oh,
And he starts his
We're
argument.
over-identifying.
As an educator, I have an ethical obligation.
Actually, man, so
And he votes for T at the end.
That's whatever.
it changed his name.
He-
And you know what that team that won is? Fuck it. Cena. Whatever. Okay, whatever. You voted on that team. Congrats. We're gonna
We
go
won a
drink.
10-0-1 decision.
There's like any dissents against the debate. I voted against the debate this round.
That was an option.
That was an option. I would have not given out many W's.
I actually tried to give double loss once, and John Meany would not let me.
Dang it.
I was like, it's not a script and tab program.
Everyone
You
is in
can't have double win. That causes problems. The double loss causes problems.
Yeah,
It's easier.
More sorting.
Did you lose it?
Mocking, you have a timer with you? Maybe it's your birthday.
Mako Woo.
Oh, sorry.
That's like actually.
Yeah.
You gonna take a breath for a
Alright.
No.
Okay.
Inherency first argument is that the violence against women is a common attribute that contributes to the overarching metaculture of patriarchy in India. This identification of Indians as having a national culture of violence is the bulk of the political discourse, especially since the gang rape in December. That the entirety of media is focused on this aspect of the Indian culture. This justifies the white man savior complex, which is an intervention in order to justify intervention in this type of conflict. This is a legitimization of the white man intervening to save the brown woman from the brown man. This creates a normalization of a reputation of this creates a normalization in regards to what violence is and what it means for violence to exist. This is why Sarah was disgusted when she heard the topic, because there is a certain image that is brought to mind when in reality Western values, or all Western values argue that the only way to preserve the women's right is through things like economic development, without the negative implications or understanding of the dissemination of neoliberalism. On November 12th, this is awful. On November 12th, 2012, 112 women died in a fire in Anpaka, Bangladesh. This was because women are forced to work a 10-hour workday where they are not even allowed to go to the bathroom when they want. Women are literally barred into sweatshops where they cannot escape. They were incapable of escaping the fire because they were literally locked, shackled into this building. Thus, the plan. The United States federal government should condition all textile purchases from the Republic of India on the implementation of significant regulations of sweatshop labor practices. Again, the United States federal government should condition all of its textile purchases from the Republic of India on the implementation of significant regulations of sweatshop labor practices. Here's my copy. Do you have any questions?
Do we have any questions? No, we're good.
Solid. First argument is that we have a garment quota from India right now, which is a promise to purchase a certain percent of their textiles, 60% of their exports. We purchase 60% of their exports, and we are the largest consumer of Indian textile exports, which means that we are the largest, we are the country that contributes the most to these conditions and to not rectifying this situation eventually. Harm's first argument is that the acceptance for transnational is that we don't have any accountability for transnational sweatshop giants in the status quo. Global sweatshops have slave wages and 90-hour work weeks where women have this myth of going to the workplace in order to leave the kitchen. But this is actually just them entering into indentured servitude where women do not have enough money to escape to a better job, and they don't have enough education to escape to a better job, and they don't have the skills to be able to escape to another job, and they only make 18 cents an hour, which means they don't have the money to move out of the situation. There are horrible health and safety standards. The example that we give you from Bangladesh is the exact type of health and safety standards that you see in thousands of sweatshops all across India. There are arbitrary and cruel discipline that subjugates women to enormous amounts of abuse and intimidates them into preventing organization of women, which means that they can't advocate for their own rights because women are literally indentured servitudes that are forced and disciplined, that they are punished for things that they didn't do in order to prevent women from being able to feel like they have the ability to, the agency to advocate for themselves. There is no maternity leave. Often these women are younger than 15 years old. Their families contract them to sweatshops in order to earn their own dowry, which means they don't even get to keep the wages. The money literally just goes to whoever their parents decide that they will be married off to. Plan solves this. These types of conditions work as our typical response to human rights violations, and it is the normal need for economic pressure internationally. We see that this empirically worked in South Africa in the 1980s against apartheid policies, in Eastern Europe between the 70s and 90s against Soviet human rights violations, and in Hungary against worker rights violations. They're the impacts. We think the violence against women is bad. All of the things coming out of the 1AC are awful. They're awful. And the U.S. institutionally supports them through our purchases. And we think that that is problematic. To be a target based on a biological assessment made about you is the ultimate form of value assignment, where individuals, their value assessment to the overall culture is based primarily on their sex and their ability to contribute to the economy. This is traumatic for women who are harassed and intimidated, who are stressed and have anxiety inflicted on their lives. This creates medical problems with sexual assault and PTSD. There is a climate of violence that makes it harder for survivors to participate in social organizations in order to stop this themselves. It creates a feeling of alienation and depression, where alienation decreases value of life and makes it so that nihilism becomes inevitable. The result of this is suicide, because women are put in the most extreme psychological isolation. Additionally, this creates psychological violence within a minority, and this creates a cycle of violence within a realm of sexual violence. This is the root cause of dehumanization, because it shows that an unequal relationship between parties allows and justifies for domination and destruction. This is a systematic impact, which means you prioritize the ongoing magnitude of the 1AC. When there is a value prescription made to your life, then it means that all violence can be justified against you, because you become a commodity based on the amount that you can produce economically, the amount that you contribute to the overall societal welfare. We think that this is a problem not only with the government, but There's also a problem with the way that we evaluate society. This creates a kill the state mentality where neoliberalism convinces us that we have to save part of, where we have to save part of our society by destroying part of it. This creates economically mutable populations that results in objectification. The exact type of objectification that we see for women based solely on their biology is the objectification that is reflected in their economic worth. Is additionally. Evaluate the 1AC impacts first. The crisis-based mentality of dissonance is a paranoia that drives us to military decision-making that only results in miscalculation and inaccuracy in conflict. Also, the idea that wars have a definitive beginning and end point ensures that we don't have any action to solve and equalize structural violence. Additionally, we think additionally, structural violence kills more than 18 million people per year versus the 100,000 people that are killed in armed conflict between. You should err on the side of chipping away at structural violence instead of deterring an alleged future conflict. This means that the 1AC impacts become prioritized because, look, extinction and all war is justified when individuals do not have value, when individual life does not have value, because no value to life means no impact to life. And then this was, yeah, I got you.
Order's gonna be one off, and then Kate's, yes, it's okay.
Well,
Whatever you want.
Is Kate after that or just no?
Yeah, Kate's is after that. Alright. Everybody? First disclaimer, one, roll ballot. The judge acts cultural theories within this spectrum choose that every posits better orientation towards life should win. Again, the judge acts cultural theories within this spectrum, whichever means everything posits better orientation towards life should win.
Clear.
A. Volunteer, various cultures. We use questions psychological everything to the PNC, the ramifications, their truth, reputation, health, reality, and policy making. Limit by natural system, also produce things like their features, things that their case impact become inevitable. B. Bad methodology. Bad methodology produces bad policy. If we put their methodology, follow use judgment, not evaluate their impact. Their scenarios are true through specific lens. If we put this lens of thought, then you should not, you should not evaluate. Choose the K as a prior question. Logically, you should justify their advantage, shape toward around, choose the Davis question before we determine the merits of their policy. Previous role playing is bad. Role playing the federal government divorces invaders from their actual agency and causes them to escape from their awful behavior in the name of the government. This is what allows them to justify arguments like white is good or rape good, and B is really merely the name of B merely the mentality of the government. Two is that B is that this is community use of teachers and medicalized critical education. Because this is only kind of the form of education that is slapped on by policy pros, causing us to only learn about things like politics and hegemony, meaning that we never expect our critical education. Yeah. If their offense on the alternative is going to be true, this proves our offense here. Look, in this round, you can either vote for the team that tries to, you should vote for whoever actually solves back for structural violence against women the best. A artificial plan or an actual, or the K. Thesis. The object refers to the human reaction, i.e. horror or vomit, to a threat and breakdown of meaning caused by the loss of distinction between the subject and object or the self and the other. Again, the thesis is the object refers to the human reaction, i.e. horror or vomit, to a threat and breakdown of meaning caused by the loss of distinction between the subject and object or the self and the other. One is context. Objects is probably tried to be an example of the course in which our symbolic ideas of death are never challenged until we get come into contact with an actual dead body, making us feel physically ill as they remind us of our own material reality. This is psychoanalytic terms, the rupture of the symbolic or perceived world with the real. Within this debate round, the self is contextualized by the way in which we come to this world, the other is that which we have yet to experience. The self is self-referential to the other, and in that experiences which are foreign to us create us. Two, adjective the process that we use to understand the world. Our intelligence of the world around us stems from the way we engage in it. Adjective the process that helps us retain meaning, stratification with our own world lens. For example, you wouldn't know right from wrong without the guilt and sympathy for things like your parents and your surroundings. These sort of physical responses are the accident that shape our moral and values. First, disaster porn. Their impacts of structural violence against women are merely a fetishization of atrocities in the real world in order to garner a ballot in the symbolic debate fantasy. This destables the way in which we approach the real alternative activity, causing us to lose our objection and process to be able to do this. Two is the day collapse theatric. The distinction of the affirmative representation of the school or their solvency of their impacts was objection. They posit another understanding of the world that disincentivizes and delocates them from their psychological position in the world. They no longer have a physical response to this sort of violence and violence and these sort of impacts, and they place the average ratio. Three is normativity. The act makes normative value claims about the distinction of the way in which the world functions. The way they respond to their impacts is predicated off a stable idea of what happens in the world. They exclude the and reject the idea of actually looking at why they are running their plan, and they actually embrace the irrationality of the world. Or economic normalization. Their idea of economic sanctions are a way to try to distance themselves from the actual violence that's happening in this and in India. They simply say that if we stop buying these goods, then we can sell back for us. We don't even have to think about the rape that's happening there because we can just ignore it because they're no longer buying the goods, no longer contributing it. They don't actually embrace this idea, which means again, next impact. Ambiguity of ethics. Conflating the real and the real and the symbolic means that they can't distinguish between the self and the other, which ultimately means that we can't like approach the world and make ethical choices. When the distinction between the self and the other is broken down, that allows for infinite violence against the other. This is the root cause of all violence. Is we can no longer deem things as right or wrong because we have become desensitized and they have embraced the average under erasure. Like Nazis in a death camp, we can't distinguish between the symbolic determination and determination in our own hands. There's no objection means that they cannot inform the decision. Two is a death threat. Object is the process by which we inform all of our senses and orientate ourselves towards the world. When the affirmative plays the average under erasure, they collapse the way in which we interact in the world, which accumulates in nihilism and accumulates in extinction. Three is no value to life. The process of objection is one in which we are able to locate ourselves within our social interactions, social surroundings. Without the object, we cannot have social interactions and construct ourselves. This means that we can't tell the difference between happiness and depression. This is the ontological damnation. Fourth, in this turn's case, they can't construct an actual lens to view the world and what is right or wrong and actually having a way to address these sort of issues because outside of this realm, like when we hear about things like rape and structural violence that happen, we become desensitized to it because we've heard about it so much, we've used it as ways to win rounds, and we argue that it doesn't matter. Like how many times in a round have you heard that structural violence doesn't matter? These are the sort of arguments that happen in debate rounds. This is what they're calling their fetishization is causing this. Alternative. Vote opt to reject the conflation of self, other, real symbolic dichotomies and engage this debate as a space for objection. Alternative. Vote opt to reject the conflation of self, other, real symbolic dichotomies and engage this debate as a space for objection. Engaging objection solves the thesis of the criticisms of the act and ignoring of objections. The all redraws and the distinction between the self-other and the symbolic and the real, which clearly solve back to this. Two, that the debate is key. If the act loses because their worldview is incorrect, then they will feel a physical response, which equals the objection that we were talking about. This is the only way to actually relocate the objection that happens in relocate objection and stop ignoring. Three is that all we need to do to win is prove that our alternative is the best way to orientate control life and the best way to actually solve back to the structural problems that we're talking about. Term preempts. Any permanent in your intrinsic or severance, this equals a moving target which excuses from out of the LLC. This is a voter for fairness and education because you no longer want anything because it meets all of the education of the LLC, and just it's not fair and causes the affirmative always winners means the debate collapses. These are any perm still links any residual link to any residual link to the criticism because of the link to the Affirmative Speech Act of the PMC means that it's DA to the perm. Additionally, Speech Act, yeah, you have to see is still representation and it's still a link. Okay. All right. Good case. Goes one Z. Look. They have no way to solve back for this. They say 60% of the textile trade is from the United States. This is true, but India's biggest trade partners are the EU, the UAE, and China, which means that they have a bunch of other options to go to, which means these sort of like arguments are not able to actually solve back for this. The sale of textiles can always go to a different country and can always be relocated to different places, which means that there's absolutely no way for them to actually solve back for any of the actual violence that's going on in this. The only thing they do is try to distance themselves from the actual violence that's going on. Additionally, any sort of U.S. crackdown or decrease in trade relations is only going to equal Indian backlash. This can only be perceived as this is only infuriate like Indian people and cause a worse reaction. Three is that sanctions make it look like the U.S. is trying to control India. The idea that we are going to withhold things until they change their internal policy is only going to the idea that they're trying to control India is only going to be a plausible reason why. Right now in the status quo, there are changes coming in India. There have been tens of thousands of people protesting in the streets. The government has actually made a new committee to look into this, and the government has also set up trials for the expedition of rape and the treatment of women, showing that the government is taking a proactive stance against the patriarchy that's going on in the status quo. What this does is that it gives the opposition and people who are opposed to this a way to say, look, this is not about rape or about treatment of women, this is about the United States, and it means that there's going to be exceeding backlash in this, and that they have a way to now stop these progresses moving forward in India. Yeah, anything else? Alright, that's good.
I'm aware. Okay, it's going to be the case. I would like to float overview on the newspaper paper on top, and then I'm going to go onto the arguments that they made, and then I'm going to go line by line. And then it's going to be the critique in the order of framework, alternative, links, and facts. I'll put the framework, thesis, alternative, links. Everyone good?
Even when things done.
Yeah.
So overview on top, case in order, and then framework, thesis, alt impact, links, alt impact, and
Framework, thesis, alternative, links, impacts. Sorry. This is why I like going on my sheet. Oh well. Okay. I apologize. Okay, everyone good?
Yep.
First of all, R1AC is not about the rape instances that the topic is supposed to be about. We clearly take a stance against this. We articulate that the way in which the textile industry is functioning within India right now is leading to the worst impacts of both neoliberalism and the impacts of patriarchy and women's rights violations because of the economic system that exists. Women have no place in the system except to be able to get money so that they can get married and get their dowry to a husband. We say that this is uniquely bad for two reasons. The first reason is it causes women, it causes unique violations of women's rights because there's lack of education and lack of financial incentives. We isolate the people who are literally burning to death in factories that they are locked into. I think that this is an issue that comes prior to the critique. In addition, we articulate that neoliberalism, we articulate that this ideology of neoliberalism, the ideology of the kill-state mentality, we have to kill part of the population in order to say the rest is going to be controlling the internal links, all of the impacts within the debate room. We isolate the class is uniquely important because this is what unifies individuals and controls the internal links to separate because when people are only using economic shit, it means they're incapable of having value, which means that within the world, neoliberalism, you getting access to your critique impacts. So line by line, using that they have other options with China and India. We classify that textile is India's second largest industry and that the United States takes 60% of these and that they have qualitative guarantees. They can't go anywhere else. Even if they could, there would be huge time frame delay, which means they don't want to lose United States business because we want to be able to cooperate with the United States and other issues such as civil disarmament of the U.S. civil disarmament of weapons indicates that India is going to work with us. The next domain does not pass in the backlash. India's tech sector is the most important part of this economy that requires the United States industries in order to be able to solve this. They want to be visas, which means that they're going to be able to cooperate with the United States next. The United States is going to be able to look like controls from the government and commitment to call for rapists. That doesn't matter. This is what our case is about. We say that they're not going to be able to solve for the textile industry now. The only way to make them solve and put better and working conditions within the textile industry is through the 1AC and conditioning them and making them do this. Next argument, I want to go down to classify the impact level of the debate. That was on the overview. Also, drop down to the third impact argument making days. I want the C subpoint, which talks about how structural violence kills 18 million people every year. These are impacts that are happening right now. They're going to happen in the world where we intellectually master them through critique. These people are still going to be suffering and dying within the world status quo. We articulate the ethical obligation to stop the subject of the critique debate. Critique. First framework. First counter-interpretation. The role of the ballot is for judges to evaluate who takes the best ethical stance against neoliberalism. The role of the ballot is for the judges to decide who takes the best ethical stance against neoliberalism. This is done for a couple of reasons. The first reason is practice. That we articulate that in the status quo issues or that the structural violence issues happen every single day. We articulate the reasons why these deaths occur, the reasons why the structural violence issues, why women have 10 to decades less life expectancy than men is because of the lack of visibility of these issues. The lack of visibility of these issues. We need to bring this into the ground order to be able to solve it. In order to be able to solve back this, we need to work by people and taking an ethical stance to understand the ways in which we as individuals are responsible within the government that we work with to be able to solve back this. In addition, we articulate that neoliberalism should come before the cultural theory argument. For a couple of reasons. The first reason is that within the role of neoliberalism determines who is capable of accessing democracy. It also determines who is capable of access to education, which means that many people are excluded from the world of your education simply by being provided by your cultural theorists requiring a PhD to be able to evolve with it. Also, critiques capable of solving back this and allowing for individuals to gain the framework that you isolate. Next argument is cultural theory is bad. Next argument is cultural theory is bad. We articulate that your cultural theorist argument allows you to make overarching claims about cultural relativism to say that there are no morals that exist, that there are not morals that exist in the norm within the world, that simply focus and differentiate on specific instances. We articulate this is bad for the reason of ethics. Someone is that ethics are uniquely key. If we don't have an ethical obligation to the other, then it means we don't have any incentive to keep that person to keep that person alive. Their life literally has a 0-point value because we don't have any obligation to them. And the point where this happens, it means that we don't think that death is bad, which means that we all go extinct. Which means that we all go extinct because there's no consequence of death. This is the only capability of solving for back. The next argument is that ethics is capable of solving for normal life, capable of solving back for the impacts of the critique. We articulate that individuals interact with each other in a positive manner instead of through a negative manner of objectification is internal link to solve for the impacts we were capable of solving back through this neoliberalism. The next argument is the discourse isn't key. We articulate that the next discourse is the key. You don't have any discourse is the key. Rhetoric is important in shaping how political decisions get made, but it's not the only thing that matters. For instance, while we have many discursive changes that we want within the world of academia, women's and gender studies have blown up within the academia, but we still have people in politics that are saying things like there are instances of legitimate rape. It proves that this is not translating to the political realm. We have the obligation to change the political realm in order to change the evaluation that individuals are having, or the way that individuals experience their own life. The next argument is actually good. We ways individuals, citizens of our nation state, are capable of interacting with the government, are capable of changing the ways in which these types of politics function. Democracy is only internal to agency because it allows people to have a little voice and determine the value of life within that world agency. All of your must become inevitable corresponding law of justification. Means that you say the U.S. have to use policies and hegemonic debate. I think the part where only structural violence impacts proves that this is false. We can use the SDG to make positive impacts. Alternative terms. The first argument is the loose term here, the psychoanalysis has a strict binary. What's the normal function of the mind? This idea of what is normal within the mind, the way that the mind should function, the way in which the object real situated within the mind is very limited. And assumes that there's one universal way in which mind functions. This leads to biopolitical implications, and people whose minds think differently. People who attempt to society go outside of social norms are ostracized as being the other. The ostracized does not function in a normal way. It's classified as a deviance. That people with this deviance are pressured into conforming to social norms and interpreters here that this is a greater term linked to cultural relativism. In addition, this causes devaluation of life and empirically leads to things like suicide, because within the mental health system it's impossible to we isolate that this is going to scratch that. We isolate that this is going to be uniquely bad and internally linked to the entirety of the one I see. Furthermore, this means that you're capable of solving the root cause of the one I see impacts if you don't understand the ways in which individuals in different social locations are capable of experiencing like next is the epistemology chart. The first argument is that you come from a place of ivory tower intellectualism and within the academia, where you can simply sit in your armchair and think about what it means to think about the real and think about the symbolic and think about all that other psychoanalytical bullshit. We say that this does not take into account the ways in which individuals are experiencing their lives. This means that you're going to create universal ideologies, universal things that are going to be able to solve for all problems, but you don't understand the way that different cultures, the way that different individuals experience life, which means you're never capable of solving the root cause of the problem because you can never diagnose it. In addition, it means you take the reins of power out of individuals' hands who aren't capable of accessing these systems. This means that the one I see impacts become inevitable and it needs to be itself the root cause of the one I see, because people that are within these situations can never access the type of education that you isolate. You articulate the epistemological this is my votation. The next argument is turned by physical innocence. Your alternative assumes that the mind is an abject place in which we can make morally pure stances in which nothing bad can possibly happen. This allows us to believe that anything that we think within our head is going to be possible, and doesn't allow us to acknowledge the ways in which a lot of our minds are informed by the cultural norms that we're raised in, such as patriarchy and neoliberalism. This means that if we're capable of solving for those possibilities within the future. The next argument is turn patriarchy. The entire basis of the psychoanalysis is both real and based on the role that is based on the role of the father within this analysis. Is based on the role of gender relationships. We haven't even talked about this until later in decades. We've talked about this within like accusations like this is structural violence impacts that are happening on the case. But in addition, it means we're never capable of solving back issues of gender inequality. This is always going to outweigh the case. The next argument is permutation. Vote affirmative and reject the conflation of self, other, real symbolic dichotomies and engage this debate as a space for abjection. Can you do that again? Okay. There are a couple of benefits. For the first one, this is permutation of capable solvency. Because we don't need ontological or epistemological consistency in order to be able to solve the type of when I see there are multiple problems that exist within the world. We have to be able to move past them in order to be able to solve for the physical situation of people or having successful. The next argument is coalitions. We are capable of creating coalitions within the government. In addition, we're capable of creating coalitions and allowing people to access the reins of power, which is going to solve for fatigue within the long term. The next argument cross line from the framework of the discourse is key because of no ability for it to get outside of the academia.
Is there a timer in that? Nope.
Make a cheeseburger.
That's quite better.
I'll just have you guys open my.
Alright, so it's going to be the framework page, the alternative page, the links page, the impacts page, case. Actually, scratch that. Sorry. We're going to go links and impacts before the deal. So, K in order, case.
You assume I remember the original order of the K.
Framework, thesis, links, impacts, Everybody good?
Yes.
First off, there's a dissent to their counter-interpretation. This is going to be the essentialism term specifically. They specifically say that the ballot should only endorse the stance of neoliberalism, which is rejecting all of their coalition and building arguments. All of their arguments are predicated off of why we should be able to solve neoliberalism, which necessarily crowds out all other ethical stances that you could be taking in the round. Our argument is that you should orient yourself towards the way in which the best lens on life is, which means that we are more inclusive. Additionally, all of our framework arguments subsume all of theirs. They're still able to fight back for neoliberalism under our interpretation, which means that this is probably just going to end up being a really messy framework to be where we're both going to agree that neoliberalism is bad, but it's going to come down to the line by line. Specifically, we're saying that their framework of neoliberalism can function within ours, because we just say whoever has the best orientation towards life should win. If they prove that neoliberalism is bad enough to warrant the ballot, then they win. So hopefully they'll probably agree with that. It doesn't really matter. Let's go to line by line. Their first argument is based off of pragmatism and that how we have to engage in the political realm. However, I want you to send across your number 3, little a and little b arguments about why role-playing is bad. All of these arguments are contingent upon political action, but our argument is that we are not the United States federal government. We have no agency in the levers of power. We are not the ones who control things like this, so it is a hollow gesture to women in India to say that you are able to solve back for the systematic oppression and violence that they have, but because you read 7 minutes in a PMC. Our argument is that this is a reason for why role-playing is bad, because it divorces us of actual substantive activism and instead allows us to sit in the the ego and masturbatory echo chambers of debate and just say things like we should solve oppression but never solve it. That is the activism DA that we read on the 3 little a argument that Megan never responds to, that specifically says that even if role-playing is good, it's better for us to actually engage in action. Their next argument is that neoliberalism should come first because it determines who gets to democracy. Our argument is that neoliberalism should not come before how we live our lives, but rather it should be evaluated in comparison with the criticism. This is not preclusive of our argument, but rather we're just saying that you can evaluate the K and the F side by side, and it can just become impact comparison debate. Their second argument is that culture theory is bad. They specifically say that we're able to make overarching claims about culture. However, this is not the actual role of the ballot. Our interpretation is that you should evaluate the way in which we best value life. Cultural theory is not what we defend, rather we use this as a term to describe the way in which you should orient yourself towards life. Go to the ethics debate. They specifically say that ethics are key. However, all of these ethics arguments are irrelevant in a world where we are not the United States federal government. Even if ethics are a good thing, we are saying that the way in which you should orient yourself towards life is not one that scapegoats our responsibility onto things like the federal government, who ultimately does fucked up things. Additionally, they make this big argument about how this is capable of solving back for the criticism. However, this is untrue, where we specifically make link arguments to say that the way in which you use economic sanctioning is a distancing of yourself from violence, which turns back all of your ethics impacts. Their next argument is that discourse isn't key to rhetoric, and even though it's good, it doesn't have a political transcendence. You can crossplay all of our role-playing bad arguments, but political transcendence doesn't matter in a world where we can't engage in politics via the affirmative. It means that this does not matter. We have short-circuited all of their political offense. Their number 4 argument on here is that role-playing is good, and they say that it's key to individual action and democracy. However, you can extend across our argument and say that you do not have your hands on the levers of power, which means that it doesn't matter if the state is good but role-playing rather is bad, because it divorces us from the agency of the affirmative and of the 1AC, from the speech act of that, which is bad. And all of the links to the criticism are reasons why role-playing is bad. Go to the thesis. You can extend across the entirety of the thesis. We specifically say that abjection is the process in which we use to understand the world. This is what sets up the distinction between the self and the other, which is the predicate to all of our relationships within the world. When the affirmative breaks down that bond, then it means that we are no longer able to shape ourselves and locate ourselves within the world, which means that all of their structural violence claims become irrelevant because we don't know how to approach the world post the 1AC. We have no ability to make ethical choices. That's a conceded number 1 impact scenario that specifically says that the ambiguity of ethics happens when we can no longer derive ourselves from the distinction between the self and the other. You can extend across all of our conceded link arguments, the disaster point argument, the collapse of the abjection argument, and the normativity argument. All of these are going to become, and the economic criminalization argument, all of these are going to be disadded to the permutation, and you can extend across all of our impacts. There is a conceded extinction scenario via death drive and a no value to life scenario that happens via the PMC. All of those are extinction level disadds. We should outweigh on magnitude. What do you mean? Also you can extend across the number 4 argument about how this turns case and that when the world lens gets screwed up, but when you try to reject the self and other dichotomy, then that's what causes all of your impacts to become inevitable. It means that we straight win. Even if we don't win on the impact calculus debate, they are conceding a case turn that comes by the criticism. go to the alternative problem. First off, I want you to group all of the psychoanalysis arguments. They specifically say that we try to identify one way in which the mind functions. This is not what we are doing. All of our arguments are based off of the mind process of abjection. Our process is that all our argument says is that there is a way in which we define the self and a way in which we define that which is not the self. This is not ostracizing, it is not causing deviancy, but rather is just a description of the way in which you interact with the world. This is just intuitive. This does not cause devaluation of life or suicide, but rather is just a description of the way in which you interact with daily life. They make the link turn. They say that this link turn is the 1NC. However, this is not responsive to our argument. It specifically says that the entirety of the 1NC is a link turn to the affirmative because it criticizes the lens through which you try to evaluate the debate via the 1NC. They make an argument about how individuals are always differing. However, this is true. We never say that individuals are all the same. Psychoanalysis is not trying to say that everybody's the same. Rather, our argument is saying that the way in which you approach the world is fundamentally flawed. Yeah, what's up?
So then you can say your alternative doesn't solve anything.
No, our alternative rejects you. That's all we need to do. We redraw the lines between the self and the other. That's conceded solvency that you don't answer. Go to the epistemology term. This argument is basically just, they just say that we're in the ivory tower. However, they are conceding our number 2 argument specifically says that we are able to have solvency in this round because if you reject them, they're able to have that objection, and that allows for us to make more ethical considerations in the future. Additionally, I want you to extend across our argument that it's the number 3 argument that says that we don't need to win. Our ideology is necessarily good, but if we win, then we are the best orientation towards life. Rather, that we should make ethical decisions, then that is the way in which you should resolve this debate. That is what you can resolve via the alternative. The alternative is just based off of the judge's orientation towards the ballot. They say that we can't solve the root cause when we are up in our ivory tower. However, we never try to solve the root cause, but rather we are diagnosing the problems of your 1AC in the lens in which you use to define the debate. This is not an independent voter. They never tell you why this is a reason to vote for us or vote against us for fairness in education. There's no reason why you should reject us. Next, go to the moral purity argument. We never make moral purity arguments that they say that this allows for things like patriarchy. We never justify this. None of these arguments are responsive to the fact that we just say that our lens of the world is that between the self and the other. Go to the patriarchy term. They specifically say that psychoanalysis is based off the role of the father and that we can't solve because of this. However, this is not our form of psychoanalysis. We are a specific form of psychoanalysis that says that there is a distinction between yourself and those that are different from you. That is all. We are not justifying patriarchy. On the perm, extend across all of the perm, the little b on the perm preempts. This is severance, and this is an independent reason to vote against them. Additionally, the permutation still links to the affirmative, and there is multiple extinction level dissets to the permutation via the death drive impacts the agency. Yeah, no. What? Anyways, they say that they don't need epistemic consistency. However, that is literally what we say is that when you try to use the representations of the PMC, then you necessarily link in. All of the links are conceded dissets as to why the permutation is not going to be able to solve. Your coalitions don't matter when it culminates in extinction.
Right. I'll ramble the cave for 4 minutes. It's going to be in order. There's going to be an overview on top, though. It's even more LOR than the normal LOR. Ready?
Should I write that someplace special?
You can float on some piece of paper. LOR special. Alright, we ready? Look, Keating, Megan are standing here and talk a lot, very passionately about these violence that's being done to women and the structural problems that are being done to women. Now, your options are to vote for a plan that takes a stance against that and through policy action in government that doesn't actually have an impact on this round, but then would link in, or you go for the negative, where we explain that their idea of using these things to, using these sort of impacts and these sort of festivization and using this as a roll the ballot and like you should send our link, you should look to our link now, so using this to create the sort of lens that's flawed. And then outside of the round, this means that we no longer have the ability or the clarity to actually engage in these sort of ethical questions. So outside of the round, we're no longer able to distinguish whether these women are being oppressed or how to handle these situations. So when you're outside of this round and you see something like this happening, you're no longer able to distinguish whether this is right or wrong because you've been desensitized and the abject has been collapsed. This is our argument. The only way you actually solve back for these sort of women's rights issues in the real world is through voting negative and instilling the objection within us. This is what our alternative says that the only way you actually gain this sort of solvency is by rejecting them because that actually causes a physical response to them, right? Like when they lose this round, they are going to be pissed because they lost this round about women's rights, and that is going to cause a physical reaction breakdown to them. Go to the framework proper. Look, our interpretation subsumes all their interpretation in the is more inclusive, right? Like, we're simply saying that whoever posits the better orientation towards life should win. That means that you can look at the neoliberalism compared to our ideas of abjection next to each other. This is obviously the most inclusive. You should send all the dissents to this. But additionally, we think that we're going to clearly win this round with the internal link to the entirety of the case. Because without the sort of abjection that we have, we can never solve back from neoliberalism because we don't actually realize that it's a problem because we can't distinguish between right and wrong. This is the ambiguity that has its impact on the case. Additionally, you should extend the role-playing bad arguments. These go woefully answered to solve back all of their offense on the framework arguments today, saying that role-playing bad is the divorce system or actual agency and allows people to make arguments like neoliberalism good and things like that. These are the sort of arguments coming into play in this role by role-playing bad because they don't actually change any actual policy going on. You voting for these ballots does not actually affect any sort of like trade relations with India, which means they don't have any actual solvency outside of this round. We are the only team that has a solvency outside of the round, and we're saying that discourse is important and this actually shapes what happens to you. Okay? I mean, you should extend our thesis that abjection is what helps you which helps you actually inform your decisions. You can obviously the link to this you should extend the first three races are all this sense of the permutation, which I think Connor sends well. But additionally, you should extend the fact that they are collapsing the abject and that they are creating a normative structure that they are not able to solve back for. This pushes the abject. We no longer are able to solve back any of the problems within the world. This is the number one of the ambiguity of ethics, right? When we can't solve back problems because we don't know whether it's a symbolic like extinction or whether it is the actual extinction of the death camps like Nazis. We're not able to solve back for anything. This means that we're not able to you're outside of this round, you're not able to actually distinguish between what's real and what's just a debate fantasy, what is it like good solvency arguments, what's good uniqueness scenarios for going on in the status quo, right? Like these are kind of the reasons that when we are out there and you hear about like a terrorist attack or something like that, you think, oh, this is sweet uniqueness, right? Like this is the idea that your idea between the symbolic and the real has been collapsed. You're no longer actually able to move forward right or wrong. We can't ethically approach the world, which means they cannot solve back for any of their impacts, and the case is the only impact to solve back for any sort of actual meaningful change in women's rights. Additionally, death threat and the value of life are to extinction or impacts to the affirmative and to the perm. And additionally, you should extend that to number 4, consider arguing that we internal link to the entirety of the case because they have no lens that they can actually view the world through, which means they can't solve back for the problems they're talking about because their lens is fundamentally flawed. Both y'all. Obviously, there's a lot of levels down the line, but I think we're clearly winning. The only thing we need to solve for this is the idea that we create objection that we are better orientation towards life, that we actually have out-of-ground solvency. This is continually on the perm. You should extend the perm in severance until they have answers, which means they get no new answers, which means you cannot vote on the perm. Additionally, they might go for this metaphysics argument. We think this can be completely outweighed by the fact that we are not prescribing a specific culture or anything like that. We're simply saying that the way you interact with yourself and the subject is the way that you gain the idea, the ability to see the world, and that's how you define your culture, right? It's a prerequisite.
Oh, I said it earlier, sorry. Do we move this on the bottom?
The order is going to be the 1AC, and then the ring up debate, and then the alternative debate. You like it? You like 1AC for alternative?
Yeah. That's a good one.
Yep. I'm excited.
Are you gonna make a note?
Yeah, there will be.
Should I throw that someplace special?
I would appreciate it. You can float next to Megan's overview if she would like.
Thank you.
Doesn't need her to separate you.
Is that okay, Megan?
You're allowed to share my overview space.
Alright. When AC describes and seeks to change worlds where individuals don't have the ability to escape from an 18 cents an hour wage, where individuals don't have the ability to escape when they are barred into sweatshops. We think that this is problematic. The 1AC isolates an instance of material harm that is happening in the status quo that cannot be solved through the criticism because your alternative does not allow for visibility of structural violence, which we isolate as the internal link to solvency. This visibility is not predicated on fiat. Our reading of the 1AC, our speech act does this, which means that the case becomes a dissent to the alternative. The 1AC extension, I think, is fairly clear. This is wrong. It is wrong. Structural violence kills 18 million people per year, which means that these individuals will still die after the criticism. You can see that this is an ethical obligation that we have to take a stance and peel away at instances of structural violence, which means that even if you win all of the criticism, even if you win the alternative solves this instance, you do not solve the durability of structural violence happening in the future, which means that the 1AC is evaluated at a level prior to the criticism, and the 1AC independently outweighs the K. Next. So, further. Our argument throughout the entirety of the debate has been evaluate the political and ethical stance of the 1AC. We think that democracy and autonomy are necessary. People being able to allow people being able to access even more alternative, which means that only the 1AC can allow for any type of solvency in this debate. Role-playing arguments. Your argument about divorcing ourselves from our speech acts are predicated on us not being affected by our arguments, but we need to know how we interact with the government. We articulate that role-playing is the internal way to people being able to access agency, not only within debate, but within the real world. We say that a good example of this is we did not, until a debate about Title IX, we did not know that it was okay to institutionally complain about the fucked up things, the sexist things that our dog was doing. It is part of I don't know what part of being affected by the 1AC illustrates how divorced I am from it. This is clearly something that we are taking a personal stance against. We think that it is wrong that women are shackled into sweatshops and forced to die in fires. We take an ethical stance against this, and you are fundamentally misunderstanding the ethics. Our ethics arguments, our ethics claims are predicated not on the UFCG, but they are predicated on us reading the 1AC. On the 1AC Speech Act, they say that you can't account for saving lives. You create an instance of nihilism, and you make extinction inevitable because when you do not actively act to save lives, when you just sit around and intellectually masturbate with your criticism, then you do not have an active prevention of violence. We say that this allows people to, this allows the no value life claims. You do not have value to life when a government does not deem you worthy enough of being protected. Also, if there's one way to solve all the problems, it probably means that you assume that everyone experiences common problems, which is a problem on the alternative. Let's go there next. Your alternative, our alternative terms undermine the basis of psychoanalysis because they show it is failed and flawed, which undermines their link claims. This means that this internally linked turns your solvency. You can't solve every instance. First turn, lose. Fundamental misunderstanding of this argument, especially when you say that this is about how we define the self, and then on the next turn you say that there's a dilemma, that we need to draw a strict line between the self and the other. This is our very argument, that when you create a definition of the self, you create a set of norms of by defining the self, you require an understanding of what you are not, because you create a definition and an identity for yourself, you then have an identity of what you are not. This is the inverse of yourself. You create an instance of deviance which pressures people to conform. This devalues life because individuals who are seen as a threat to the purity of the population have all violence justified against them because they are not seen as conforming with what you deem is okay for the regime. This is the biopolitical argument that we are talking about. This independently, internally linked turns your criticism. It makes devaluation of life absolutely inevitable, which means that even if your alternative solves the instance of the 1AC, it doesn't solve in the long term. It only creates more violence because it justifies more devaluation of life. Next turn, epistemology. You say you solve because you take an ethical stance in the future. Wrong. Your individuals. This does not account for the argument that we're making. We say that individuals come from different social locations, which influences how they come to see the world and how others come to view the world. There are more worldviews than your alternative simply encompasses. This has been articulated as an independent voting issue, an independent reason to reject because the way that you create politics doesn't account for how individuals experience their own life. This also doesn't solve the root cause because you take agency away from individuals, making their own solvency of their own problems impossible. Next, metaphysics turn. You say this is a debate about the self against the other. Again, not a coherent response to our argument. You concede that the world of the alternative assumes utopia. This means that you can't recognize problems that happen in the violence from patriarchy becomes absolutely inevitable. I don't think that you realize that saying the self versus the other is not a coherent response. Oh, also on the permutation, reject the argument, not the team. This was a tested competition, never flagged as a reason to reject the team, just a reason to reject, which we will interpret as a rejection.
Good round, you guys.
We're not guys.
Yes.
Word.
I thought we made that abundantly clear.
We made that pretty damn clear.
I would
But good debate.
never